Hey, Chris, it's another week. I know you saw the news, but let's let everybody else know. It looks like Travelers Insurance is now going after not paying a claim because some people didn't do what they said they were going to do on a cyber application.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We've been telling people not to lie in those applications for a long time because eventually it's going to come back to bite them. And apparently, this ICS out of Illinois is finding out the hard way. So I guess
Yeah,
let's just
it's
cover this real quick. Let's cover the article, I think, and kind of give everybody context about this.
yeah. I'll drop the article in the chat for people. But
Yeah.
what came out yesterday in the Insurance Journal was Travelers is trying to go after ICS, trying to actually deny a claim because ICS said in 2020 when they filled out their insurance app that they had multi-factor authentication everywhere. And, and I know we've talked about it in the past that there's been, you know, short forms, long forms,
Mhm.
and skimming through this and looking at it at the travelers form, it looks like they actually have a separate form just for multi-factor.
Yeah, I went through this with the customer. They have an attestation form for that multi-factor authentication. Yeah, if you pull it up, um, this is where it kind of gets crazy.
Let me grab it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
separate
that's right.
form just for multi-factor authentication.
Yeah. So there's two. So Travelers does two different ways. They have two different insurance forms. One if you're under 50 million and one if you're over $50 million in revenue. But either way, they give you this MFA attestation form. At least for what I've seen, I've never seen anybody not given it. So if you kind of scroll down, this is where it gets interesting. They're talking about MFA for multi-factor authentication for all administrative access and remote access.
Yep.
So if you scroll down, let's just show them let's show them just the questions that they ask. So, top one is pretty standard for almost all insurance forms. Are all email required to have MFA? Yes, that's typical. Now, if you might have a service maybe that you can't have MFA in an account, and that's an accepted risk, you would put that. But for like employees, they should all have MFA. So that's standard on most insurance forms. Remote access MFA is becoming more standard, but where it gets interesting is number three. They want MFA for all internal and remote admin capabilities. Most companies don't have this. Yes, larger companies have it and things like that. But most companies aren't going to have this. So now you have to choose if you want to do business with travelers, you have to get this stuff implemented. And this is more difficult than what people realize. Yes, there are solutions out there that we can do this with, but it puts a burden on top of everything. Now, it's not a bad burden. It's something that we should have. But if you're a small company and you're trying to get insurance, like forcing this downstream, I mean, it's good for us. I mean, Bob and I like
Yeah,
it,
right. But so
but for you, it's going to cost you more money because this is something that it's overhead that you gotta pay for.
well, it's also required upgrades are going to have to happen just to get these insurance policies because
Yep.
a lot of the equipment that people have out there isn't MFA compatible. Isn't MFA compatible? There's some things we can do to maybe get it to work, get something close, but is it really going to pass the test if Travelers comes out and says the insurance company comes back and says, well, you didn't have MFA on that router or that firewall?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways. I mean, most firewalls now support MFA, so I'm not so worried
Yeah,
about
I'm
that.
thinking,
It's a little more
I
interesting.
was I was actually leaning more toward the switches that were sitting out in client sites. Those old managed switches that are sitting there, they're workhorses. They've been running forever. People don't want to touch them,
Yeah.
and you
Ah,
know,
here's the gotcha though. They don't mention access points. They just say etc. So they leave a gray area. That's beautiful. Yeah,
they also
look,
don't mention phones
it's a fair point. Or printers, right? Uh,
or toasters.
or lights, or light
Well,
switches. Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of LED build, a lot of network switches being used to control lighting now for LED lighting.
Well, this highlights a bigger problem with the insurance applications in general. Like any person can just say, "Hey, you need to have MFA and everything," right? What they're ignoring though is command line in Windows doesn't support MFA. What they're ignoring is if I don't segment my network and I just leave all this IoT stuff that we're talking about, like light switches and things like that, and they're really old and they have some level of vulnerabilities to them, your network can still be compromised. But they're not included on there as far as like your MFA. And I don't believe they talk about segmentation on this form. We can scroll through it real
No,
quick.
I didn't see anything for that. But
Yeah.
but one thing we saw with travelers just now is there's two different forms. There's
Yep.
They've got a form for under 50 million
Yep.
in revenue and assets, or 500 million in assets and below.
Yep.
And so they got the long and the short form.
Yep.
The short form is 3 pages. It used to be 5. It used, 2 years ago it was 5 questions and they were done.
Yep.
So even the short form is not as short as it needs to. And there's a lot of stuff here. I was talking to somebody the other day and said, "Oh, I didn't fill out the cyber app. The rep did it. I just signed it." So that's.
By the way, I wonder if somebody answers for that. If a rep fills out the form for somebody, can they just get fired for it? That's got to be some sort of fraud or violation.
That's not up to us to decide. But when you look at it,
no, I'm just curious if anybody.
Yeah, I know, but here's the thing:
industry answers
the
that.
business owner is the one that ultimately had to sign it. So they're
True.
the one that's on the hook.
True. But when like if there's a paper trail of the insurance agent filling it out, though, that's an interesting dynamic. I'd be interesting to see that one.
So looking at the short form, there's a question on here that actually says, "Is the applicant HIPAA compliant?" No one certifies people that they're HIPAA compliant, other than themselves.
Fun fact: I did not notice that thing before. That's funny.
So there's and this is actually on the short form.
Yep.
But one of the things that I heard the other day was, we really want to go in and talk to people and help them with an assessment before they go to fill out one of these apps, because we're hearing now that I was just looking for it to see if it was on this form, but people are being asked, "Have you ever been denied coverage before?" So if you go through and fill out an app and you say you don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and it comes back denied, now you've got a denied coverage thing that you have to go report.
Well, let's go back to let's go back to the article for ICS, and kind of go with this though. But if you read through this article, one, ICS never publicly stated they had ransomware. So I guess if you don't publicly state you've got ransomware, don't get sued by your insurance company. It makes a public record. It gets better. They had ransomware in 2022 as well.
Right.
So now they've been outed twice in the same article. But what Travelers is doing is they're saying their contract's null and void. They want to rescind the policy. They said if they would have been true, they would have never approved the policy, especially because they've already been a victim of ransomware. So I'm assuming Travelers probably paid out in 2020. We're just going to assume that, and then they get it again in 2022, and now they're sitting there in a lawsuit. The thing that Travelers is going to be careful of is, and this will come back to the court, can they do this? It'd be interesting to see how this plays out in court. If it ever even goes to trial, it may just get settled outside of a trial. It'd be interesting to see either way, because they did have MFA to protect the firewall to get into the network.
Out. They put protections on the firewall, but not behind the firewall, which is where we see most of attacks happening by internal users letting people in. So there was no protections on the server.
People click on things. People, you get a phishing email, you download something, you run it, and you've already bypassed firewall at that point. So I'm not trying to defend them, but because they did fill out the application, they did apply for it. The thing is, I've never seen this level of MFA attestations on any other cyber insurance form. But how far are we away from that being a thing? For you to get cyber insurance, How far away are we? Everybody's going to force this.
Yeah, well,
Not just remote, but
Travelers is a
internal.
big company. They probably they
Mhm.
might be leading the pack on these forms. But
Yep.
the other thing is, okay, so we got to attest to having MFA. Now we got to make sure that we can prove it later.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of ones out there. So I mean, you'd be able to prove it. The thing is, too, here's the other problem with this. They say required for all internal access. The thing about it is when you deploy MFA internally, you're going to have an account that isn't tied to MFA because you need that account just in case your MFA goes down. So if that account is somehow hijacked, are they now going to blame you and not try to cover you? Because the worst thing in the world is if your MFA provider is down and if you have zero admin access until that MFA provider comes back up. If you don't have a break glass account to where you can actually get it, that's a problem. But see, and they don't give a gray area on that application. And again, ICS, if they truly didn't have any MFA internally and they attested to that, then that's something that they're gonna have to deal with. But the people writing these insurance policies, you gotta kind of these insurance forms, you got to give some level of gray. It's not all black and white.
True.
But they're
But
not.
for those break glass accounts, you can have other controls in place for where they can be used.
Sure.
And notifications when they're being used. So you can get close.
Yeah, but they can still get ransomware out if they were able to take that account over. Because I'll give you an example. What happens if this is way too technical, but let's say you're able to hijack a computer account. And there have been vulnerabilities where you're able to take a computer account and you're able to change passwords in Active Directory. What if they got lucky and they guessed the break glass account and they reset the password to that and use that?
Well, that's a policy problem because you had your break glass account easily guessable.
No, not necessarily. If they can get access to AD and they can do like some sort of privilege escalation, and they were able to reset that password to something completely different. Even if you're notified that it's used, what happens if it happens at 2 a.m? Is anybody going to be there to look at it? I'm just trying to play devil's advocate with the insurance industry and where you need to go. And probably the biggest thing I see, and I don't want to attack people that are selling cyber insurance, but they don't know how to sell cyber insurance. Most people don't.
Well, most people think they buy a $3,000 or $5,000 cyber insurance policy that they're off the hook and they don't have to do anything anymore, and they don't have to do anything to protect themselves. But it's it's kind of like if you set your own house on fire, the insurance company's not going to pay for it.
You hope not.
If you purposely set it on fire.
True. Well, the thing to think about too is the average ransomware payment in 2020 was $300,000, like a little over $300,000. I think in 2021 it was like $900,000. So if you don't have $1 million in coverage, at least
we get that as a bare minimum at this point for clients. So
yeah, I mean, I don't want to say what ours is, but it's higher than $1 million. But then again, we're dealing with obviously because we have to have first party and third party liability, it's a little different. But the point being is this is probably going to be something that's going to keep growing, and it just highlights the need to be accurate on these applications because they're not going to double check it up front with you. They're just going to take you for your word. But the second they have to pay out, now you're going to get checked.
So big takeaway for everybody is go take a look at if you have cyber insurance. If you don't have cyber insurance, go get it. If you have cyber insurance, pull the application out, take a look at it, read it, see what you attested to. If you've got questions on some of the things that are being asked there, reach out to Chris or myself and privately share the application with us. We'll walk through it, review it with you, and really help you interpret what's there because a lot of people don't understand what the question actually means. And saying yes to it, you could end up just like ICS in court with a denied claim because you thought you were doing the right thing, but it wasn't enough. And that's 15 minutes. And I think everyone's got to get back to work today.
Sounds good to me.
So,
Thanks. Have a good week. Next week we'll be back with something.
yep. So reach out and check your insurance forms. Have a great week, guys.